Hello and welcome to the Irish Aesthete. Previously, I've been talking about the origins of Luggala, an enchanting little lodge built in the 18th century and tucked within its own valley deep in the Wicklow mountains south of Dublin. The building dates from the late 18th century when constructed for a branch of the Latouches, a wealthy banking family who ran their business from premises next to Dublin Castle. However, over the course of the first half of the 19th century, almost all private banks in Ireland, like that of the Latouches, ran into trouble. Extraordinarily, in 1820, during a financial crisis, 16 of them collapsed. None of these private banks were able to compete against the new joint stock institutions, which were not reliant on the competence of individual owners. For the Latouches, one of the consequences of financial collapse was that they were obliged to dispose of some of their properties, including Luggala, and in 1860 it passed into new hands. Luggala's new owner was Mervyn Wingfield, 7th Viscount Powerscourt. He had been a child when his father died, and only came into possession of his estate in 1857. That estate was centred around a superlative 18th century house, Powerscourt, situated adjacent to Luggala in the Wicklow Mountains. Powerscourt is famous for its terraced Italianate gardens. These were designed by the architect and landscape gardener Daniel Robertson. According to Lord Powerscourt, Robertson used to be wheeled out on the terrace in a wheelbarrow with a bottle of sherry, and as long as that lasted, he was able to design and direct the workmen. But when the sherry was finished, he collapsed and was incapable of working till the drunken fit had evaporated. The terraces at Powerscourt were created at enormous expense, involving at least 100 men over the course of 12 years. And their owner undertook further work elsewhere in the walled gardens, buying quantities of statuary and similar artworks from around Europe. This pair of gilded Baroque gates was originally made for the cathedral in the German city of Bamberg before being installed in the gardens at Powerscourt. It has been suggested that one of the reasons for the 7th Viscount's lavish expenditure was that he had no other heir than his younger brother, the Honourable Lewis Strange Wingfield. The Honourable Lewis lived up to his middle name of Strange. A great traveller, he was one of the first people from this part of the world to journey into the interior of China. Having spent some time in the army, he became a war correspondent and was in Paris throughout the city's siege by Prussian forces in 1870-71, sending reports back to London newspapers via balloon. He wrote a quantity of novels, and he also had notions of being an artist and became a member of the Royal Hibernian Academy in Dublin. However, his real passion appears to have been for the stage, and he appeared in several professional productions. Here, he's seen engaging in amateur theatricals, playing Rizzio to the future Countess of Derby's Mary, Queen of Scots. But there is, so to speak, no skirting around the issue. For the Honourable Lewis Wingfield, life could sometimes be a bit of a drag. Here he is, in the role of Miss Yellowleaf, an old-maid fortune huntress in a play called The Bengal Tiger, which was staged in Dublin in 1865, and in which he received, shall we say, mixed reviews for his performance. It's easy to understand why his respectable brother, the 7th Viscount, preferred to spend his money on improving the family home, rather than leaving anything for the colourful Honourable Lewis. Unfortunately, Lord Powerscourt and his wife, having been childless for 16 years of marriage, then belatedly had 5 offspring, and it was they, rather than the Honourable Lewis, who had to suffer the consequence of all that money being lavished on the gardens. One of the other ways in which he spent his money, of course, was in buying up property, including Luggala, seen here in a very early photograph. Lord Powerscourt appears to have done very little with his newly acquired estate, but has a sense that he bought it simply because it was next to his own and because he could afford to do so. As a result, for the second half of the 19th century, Luggala rather languished, the only change being, as can be seen here, that the building's Gothic windows were replaced with others of the more regular sash variety. And so it might have remained, but for the fact that in the early 1900s, the estate began to be rented annually by a man called Ernest Guinness. And there for the moment, I'm going to leave the story. There's still a great deal more to tell, so I shall be returning to the subject of Luggala at some future date. But for the moment, thank you so much for watching the Irish Aesthete. I look forward to seeing you again next week. Goodbye.